First Crusade. They arrived on a cold October morning in 1097. A ragged, hopeful army of knights, foot soldiers, priests, and pilgrims who had crossed mountains and deserts to reach the gates of one of the great cities of the eastern Mediterranean, Antioch, today Antakya, Hatay province, Turkey. For the leaders, Godfrey of Bouillon, a leader of the Christian crusading army, Bohemond of Taranto, also on the Christian side, a Norman prince, and Raymond IV, Count of Toulouse, another Christian noble leading a major contingent. Antioch was more than a stop on the road to Jerusalem. It was a key to the whole crusading enterprise, a fortified city that controlled the valley of the Orontes, a place where supplies, passage, and the fate of the expedition could be decided. The siege that began on 21st October would become one of the slow, savage, and myth-making episodes of the First Crusade. Antioch sat like an island of stone and civilization on the edge of what is now south-central Turkey, its Byzantine-built walls rising above the river and the broad plains beyond. Its governor, Yaghi-Siyan, he was on the Muslim side, the Seljuk-appointed governor of Antioch, had stocked its stores and prepared for a long defense. Outside the walls, the Crusaders pitched their tents in cold, noisy camps. They were not a single army with one commander. They were a coalition of proud leaders and rival egos. Bohemond, a Norman prince hardened in Italian wars, Godfrey, a pious and stubborn Frank, Raymond, a cautious but determined count, and others each held command of their retinues. They surrounded the city, set up siege engines and scaling ladders, and began the slow work of trying to shrink the world to the length of a rope or the arc of a battering ram. Sieges are tests of patience more than tests of arms. The Crusaders believed their faith would carry them. Instead, they found hunger and cold to be their truest enemies. By December, food supplies dwindled. Horses, the army's speed and strength, died in numbers. Men who had expected glory found themselves scavenging fields and hunting what they could. Foraging parties left the camps exposed and led to clashes. In late December, Yaghi-Siyan launched a daring sortie that almost broke through the Christian lines. The winter tightened around the besiegers and the besieged alike, and sickness and desertion began to hollow the crusading host. Antioch was not alone in the region. Muslim rulers in Damascus, Aleppo, and surrounding emirates watched the Crusaders advance with alarm. Small relief forces came, hoping to lift the siege. Some were turned back by the Crusaders in sharp, often chaotic fights that tested leadership and discipline. Each failed relief increased the pressure on Antioch's defenders. Each victory for the besiegers cost them men and energy. The winter and early spring saw a pattern of sorties, skirmishes, and small pitched encounters that kept both sides on edge. By the spring of 1098, the Crusaders were near collapse. Contemporary chroniclers speak of 1 in 7 men dying in some months, of bodies left unburied, and of soldiers reduced to eating leather or roots. It was in such despair that extraordinary stories emerged. A monk named Peter Bartholomew, on the Christian side, claiming to have a vision and then to have discovered the Holy Lance, the spear that pierced Christ according to tradition, hidden within the city. The discovery electrified the Christian camp. Faith replaced some fear, rumors hardened into conviction, and morale surged. Whether the lance was genuine is debated by historians, but its effect was real. It became the symbol around which men rallied for the struggle to come. In early June 1098, the Crusaders found an opportunity. A renegade or sympathetic local, accounts vary and later chronicles debate motives, allowed the Normans under Bohemond to enter a part of the city through a gate. Some accounts name an Armenian or a feint or secret negotiation. The truth blends politics and personal motives. Once a foothold was won, the Western troops surged in, and the city proper fell to the Crusaders. The citadel, however, remained in Turkish hands, and the fighting was far from over. The first phase had ended in victory, but the cost had been enormous. As the Crusaders celebrated their hard-won gains, news arrived of a far larger threat, Kerboga. On the Muslim side, the Atabeg of Mosul was organizing a massive relief army to reclaim Antioch. Where the first siege had been the Crusaders besieging the city, the second was the city held by Crusaders being besieged from the outside. Kerboga's force was large, reputedly tens of thousands strong and composed of experienced commanders and troops. The mood in the Crusader camp turned from elation to dread. Their own numbers had been bleached by death and desertion, and now they faced a field army at their gates. What followed in late June 1098 was one of those moments where fortune, leadership, and morale combined to change history. Inspired by renewed faith, the Holy Lance had strengthened belief that God supported them, and led by a handful of determined leaders, the Crusaders sallied from Antioch and engaged Kerboga's army. Their numbers were smaller, their cavalry largely gone, but their discipline and the leadership of figures like Bohemund, Christian side, and Godfrey, Christian side, together with divisions among Kerboga's allies, produced a stunning result. The relieving army was routed. Kerboga's failure to coordinate his many contingents, and perhaps his underestimation of the Crusaders' resolve, turned a likely disaster into a decisive Christian victory. With the outside enemy defeated and the citadel surrendered, Antioch became, for the Crusaders, the foundation of a new polity, a Crusader principality under Christian control. The capture of Antioch reshaped the map of Crusader rule in the Near East. Bohemund, Christian side, claimed the city as his prize and laid the foundations of a principality that would remain a Crusader stronghold for generations. But the victory had darker sides. Massacres of the city's defenders and many civilians followed, and the fragile cooperation among the Crusader leaders broke down into rivalry and politics. The First Crusade's ideals of pilgrimage and penitence had become entangled with ambitions for lordship and land. The cost to local communities, Armenians, Greek Christians, Muslims, was enormous and long-lasting. If we step back from the drama and the relic stories, the siege of Antioch still speaks to lessons that matter today. Leadership and cooperation matter. A coalition can win when its leaders coordinate, but rivalry and ambition can also turn victory into a contest for spoils. Antioch was won by people who could act together, and later claimed by those who acted selfishly. Logistics decide campaigns. Hunger and disease were as deadly as any sword. Whoever controls supply lines and can sustain an army will usually decide the outcome. Morale and belief shape reality. The Holy Lance episode shows how beliefs, true or not, can change behavior. A convinced army fights differently. Local politics are crucial. Antioch's fall wasn't only about Western knights. It involved Armenian neighbors, renegades, and regional powers whose choices mattered. External interventions cannot ignore local conditions. The human cost of war. Siege warfare means civilians suffer. The immediate gains of conquest can carry long-term consequences of displacement and violence. The story of 21st October 1097 is not a neat chapter in a textbook. It is a long, messy human story of courage and cruelty, of prayer and politics, of hunger and sudden improbable triumph. The siege of Antioch, Antakya in modern Turkey, became both a bridge and a fault line between worlds, Christian and Muslim, West and East, warrior and pilgrim. When we look back now, the city and that long siege teach us about the limits of force, the cost of conviction, and the complicated bargains that build political order after war.